Good morning, everybody. Friday is here. Yes. You've done what was required, and your reward is finally here. You get to have 2 days for yourself, including the fun of Friday, which is still my favorite day of the whole week. No contest. So there's quite a lot going on this morning. I'm happy to say we will be joined by Ben Karpinski later on. Ben, always a winner. And then later on by Joey Rasdien as well, who everybody loves. So Joey Rasdien, Ben Karpinski. Sounds like a fun way to start your Friday. I hope that's what it'll be, because that's the whole reason we do this thing every Friday morning. I've got to say this up front, because otherwise I get into trouble with the people at YouTube and the people in management, and they all tell me, I've got to keep reminding everyone to like and subscribe. So do that, and then I won't bother you for the rest of the show. Ding, 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 like and subscribe. Done. Okay, perfect. So a couple of things on my mind this week. I've been reading a really interesting book, and I actually sent Dory, the producer, this guy's name yesterday, because I suddenly thought, you know what? This is someone we need to have on the show. He's a fascinating person. Richard Heyer is his name. And I just had to look up the name of the book because I read it a while ago, but I suddenly thought, this is a dude who we need to have on. He's an American psychologist. He's well known for his work in intelligence and in consciousness. So he talks quite a lot about a number of things, but he's written a book called The Neuroscience of Intelligence, The Intelligent Brain. And you know how often on this show we call people stupid or dumb, or we say, oh, that person's really smart. They're the kind of person that I'd want to hear more from. Well, Richard Heyer has spent his entire life trying to figure out what intelligence actually means. He's come to the conclusion, and it's not just his conclusion, but it's the conclusion of a lot of scientists too. And I'll talk about it just a little bit this morning, because that's kind of the only gap I get during the week, is to talk on a Friday morning about stuff that interests me, that matters to me, that I think might matter to you. And the rest of the time it's me with a co-host, and there's always conversation, and that's the way we like the show to go. But every now and then I get a chance to just talk about the stuff that I've been reading or paying attention to. So he defines intelligence not as an IQ test. He says IQ tests are great for measuring intelligence. And by the way, he says that they're unassailable as the best test, the best known way to extrapolate and to understand and to measure intelligence. But he calls in general intelligence G. You've got a G rating. And he said your overall G is a very good indicator of your ability to do well in life. It's not the only one. He said there are lots of others. There's emotional intelligence. There's the ability to get along with people. There's charm. There's persuasion. There's affability. There's attractiveness. There's willingness to compromise. There are a whole lot of things in the world that will make you successful. But he said one of the best indicators that you can do very little about is intelligence. And he expounds for quite a long time in the book about the fact that we can't really do much to improve basic intelligence. In other words, if you test someone at the age of 9 or 10, and I think the youngest that they're supposed to be testing people at is about 12. They did this really interesting research in Scotland a couple of years ago. It was probably in the 60s, 70s, somewhere around there, where they tested the entire school population of Scotland. They gave everyone in Scotland who was 12 years old an intelligence test, an IQ test. And they then recorded those results along with information on those kids' backgrounds, whether or not they grew up in a wealthy family or a poor family, whether or not they had access to books, what kind of schools they went to. And then they did those tests again, I think at the age of 20, could have been 18, I'm not exactly sure. And they compared the results. And they found that very, very little had changed, despite 5 years of high school education. Now, this is really what I thought was interesting, because we spend a huge amount of money on education in this country. And we always talk about how if we educate people, then they will be better equipped to deal with the world. And clearly that has some measure of truth to it, right? and he explains that in every decent piece of research ever conducted on intelligence. So, by the way, this is not his research. He's a psychologist, but he compiled all the research into this book. And he's very academic and he's very peculiar about the way that he contains or includes the information that he puts into the book that the book contains. It's not he's not trying to write a thesis himself. He's merely comparing all of the information and trying to make sense of what the idea of basic intelligence is. Because what they've done throughout time is they've also tried to figure out what consciousness is, consciousness being very separate from intelligence. And he's been trying to figure out whether there's a link between consciousness and intelligence. Either way, he looked at this Scottish research, for example, and there's plenty more where that came from. And he found that the amount of education that you can use to improve your general intelligence as opposed to your knowledge, knowledge is very different to intelligence. He said, actually, it doesn't matter what school you go to, doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how what your socio economic background is. In other words, if you have a lot of resources or you don't, according to him, your native intelligence is somewhere, it's established somewhere in your childhood. A lot of it is genetic. He said genetics make up an enormous percentage of this. And this is why this stuff is so controversial, because people like to think, well, when you have nature and nurture, they should be about equal. He says no. He says basically by the age of 9, 10, 11, it's all established. And after that, there's very little you can do to improve it. He says that education itself, the school, the teachers, the resources, the amount of money you'd spend, your home environment, all of that stuff will only make up 10% after your childhood. Will only make up an improvement or a decline of 10% in the total. In other words, that's it. It's done. And I think that's really, really fascinating because it means we have to reassess the way that we prioritize certain things in education. And if you don't get early childhood development education going, which is something that I've spoken to the First Lady of this country about in an interview, that's probably last year, middle of last year. And if you don't pay attention to people while they're young and they don't get the kind of input that they need. And by the way, even that, if you have an intelligent problem-solving brain, he says a lot of that is just in the genes. Now, this is terrifying to people who are like social engineers that think you can create an equal society by just giving everyone equal education, giving them the same amount of money. This flies in the face of that. It's kind of like, the lottery of good looks, which we've often spoken about on this show, where if you're good looking, you just tend to get ahead better. People tend to like you more. And in this case, intelligence, which is not related to how nice a person you are at all. Intelligent people may be very nice people, and they may be absolutely horrendous people. And as I said at the beginning of this discussion, it's not the only measure of success. But he said it is the most valuable measure we have. And the IQ test is still the best way of doing that. He talked about IQ tests for a long time too in the book. He explains how each of the questions, which he calls items, are novel. It's they have to be unfamiliar to you. In other words, if you've seen the question before, it won't measure your intelligence as accurately as if you've never seen it before. So you have to keep repopulating these tests with new questions. And essentially, the whole point and purpose of an IQ test is to test for pattern seeking, general consciousness. They ask you things like, for example, they ask you to give a sequence of numbers and then to be able to give that sequence of numbers backwards. So in an oral test, for example, they'll say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then you need to be able to go 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. And depending on the time, and it's important also that these tests are timed, that you then, that is a mark of intelligence. And he also refers to some very interesting things. For example, about 15 to 16% of the population of the United States is below IQ 83. And the US Army will not take you. And they're always looking for a warm body, right? They will not take you if you have an IQ below 83 in the US Army. You cannot do any positive good. You will do a net bad, not through being a terrible person. Again, I have to define these things carefully because it becomes extremely controversial for people. They get very upset and offended. They go, oh, well, then you're just writing off that number of people. Well, no. I think it's important to take note that in the American population, I mean, 15% is a lot. That's a lot of people. It's about 50 odd, 60 odd million people. And he says that those people, they're not useless, but they cannot hold a job. They cannot be required and relied upon to do simple tasks. And if your IQ is below 83, you are not able to make a meaningful contribution to society in terms of work. You could do repetitive labor. There are certain things that you can be taught to do, but it's very limited because your application is so much slower and so much less reliable than everyone else's. So this is an interesting dilemma, and we should be thinking about that in this country. And according to him, it's something everyone in the world should be thinking about. If a clear 15% of the population of the United States is unemployable, then, and that's a hardware problem, by the way, which we've also discussed here on the show. It's not a software problem. You can't fix that by educating people. They are just not educable. So this is where it gets really interesting. And I must tell you, I've always been fascinated by this, and that's the one component of it, is intelligence. But then there's consciousness, which he also goes into some analysis of. It's something that Sam Harris, who I listen to in podcasts very often, is obsessed with as well. And I think it's one half of an equation that will tell us an enormous amount about how our brains work. Intelligence is one part of it. Consciousness is the other. Consciousness, of course, has to do with how engaged you are in being alive, and whether or not you are awake and paying attention, whether you are conscious on Earth or not, as a living, mortal, sentient creature. I brought up sentience with our guest John Sane on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I thought that what he said here was very interesting, because he says if intelligence can vary on a scale of 0 to 180, 200. They've measured some people's IQs to be up to 200. And some they speculate even beyond, although there's very little evidence for that. The average intelligence, IQ, intelligence quotient is what it stands for, is usually 100. 100 is the mean. It is the average intelligence of the person who does the test, because you can't be sure. They might be really good at linguistic intelligence, so they can understand vocabulary and language. And again, these tests are best administered in the language the person speaks. But there's also numbers. There's also pattern recognition, and these things have very little to do with language. So you can eliminate the language questions, he says, and still get a very good idea of someone's IQ. But consciousness might also vary, according to Richard Hyde. And I thought this was a really mind-blowing idea, that some people are smart, they're intelligent, but they're not conscious. They're not as plugged in as other people are. And maybe there's a measure for consciousness too. Some people just kind of plod through life. They're not really engaged in anything. They're not really curious about anything. They don't listen to you when you talk to them. They really aren't paying attention. And they're driven kind of almost more by automaton kind of behavior and maybe instinct than anything else. And then you get people who are very, plugged in. They're exhausting to be around. At the far end, they are these, tremendously hyper, somewhat manic, kind of crazy people they're difficult to follow. They're exhausting to keep up with. I wonder if he has a point about that and whether we'll ever get to the stage in human evolution and in science and in the science of the brain where we'll be able to imagine measuring consciousness, because that would be a fascinating endeavor. So that's what I've been reading at the moment. And I see lots of comments here, which I'm going to get to in a second. But, a lot of people dismiss IQ tests, and you're you're entitled to do that. But it doesn't make a damn difference what you think about this. It is still the best way to figure out whether someone is going to be successful or not. They've proven this time and time again. As Jordan Peterson always says, the two best measures for overall success. And remember, success doesn't equal happiness either. You can be a very successful person and be tremendously unhappy. And it doesn't equate to being a good person either. You could be an awful person and be really intelligent. You can be a very, very smart person and everyone despises and dislikes you. And you might be very unhappy too. Those are not necessarily related to this. So you've got to figure out what your priorities are. If your priorities are happiness, success, forming important and meaningful relationships with people, these are all different things and they don't all go together. It's not to say that intelligence will give you a 10 out of 10 score in all of those. It definitely won't. But it is the greatest mark of success, along with what Jordan Peterson, to get back to him for a second, calls conscientiousness, which is a personality factor. So these things are really interesting. And I want to talk to Dr. Hanan, among others. I'd also like to speak to Professor Szabo about these things now that I've read about them. But this is really interesting. And I'm sure that there are lots of comments here in the YouTube comments that will get us all thinking. Take how many genius people don't finish school. Well, that's exactly right. Because again, school doesn't seem to have a massive impact on people's overall intelligence. If your mother organized Puza Thursdays, says Parallel Parking, while she was pregnant, you are going to be pissed at your IQ results. Well, that's true. I mean, we've got very good evidence in education that the people who have fetal alcohol syndrome or who grow up with parents who abused substances during their pregnancy and or conception and or early childhood are at a huge disadvantage. So these are facts which are uncomfortable for people to deal with. Michael says, finally, a bit of an intellectual subject, no pun intended. I like today's video. Yeah, well, thanks, Michael. I mean, again, he says, I tease. I love the show, mostly on certain days. Okay, great. IQ tests are false. You can train for IQ tests. No, you can't. The point is you can't have questions that you've seen before. I mentioned that already. Oh, damn, that's depressing, says Andy. Here I am studying my ass off for what now? Well, knowledge is different to intelligence. So you're not going to get smarter, but you will get more knowledgeable. I mean, I know a lot of stupid, pointless, useless facts about, ancient history, for example, but that doesn't mean I'm intelligent. You might not want me to solve a problem for you. I might be better positioned to teach you about, the emperors of ancient Rome than I would be to solve a problem. Who knows? I mean, I haven't done an IQ test since I was at high school. And I remember I did one with the Human Sciences Research Council a while ago. And, well, it was also on my way into varsity. And they did give me the result, but I don't attach too much importance to that stuff. I really, just because I think it can be either very motivating for some people or very demotivating for others. I mean, mine came out at, I think it was 152 or 154 or somewhere around there, which is supposedly very intelligent, but I don't know that that's true. So, I mean, I'm not going to, I did do the Mensa thing. I remember I did it with Damon. We both went, and it was really more to humiliate Damon than anything else. And we succeeded. So Damon and I went and sat for the Mensa test, and I got in and he didn't. And then, of course, I didn't stay a member because I think that's really just the cheesiest organization of all. So what do you do with an average IQ of 70 here in South Africa? Is that true, G-Star? Is that actually true? I don't know that that's true, that we have an average IQ of 70 in South Africa. If it's true that we have an average IQ of 70, we've got a major, major problem. Why aren't people losing IQ every decade? No, they have to adjust the IQ to make 100 the mean. And humans are generally becoming more intelligent, but that's generational. So what happens is that every generation, the overall human population gets a little bit smarter. So they have to keep on adjusting the 100 down, I suppose. No, up. They have to keep adjusting it up, so that all the people who are being tested still form an average. As you must guess, if you're trying to get to an average, then you adjust. With the population going up in intelligence, you have to adjust up. If the IQ test was used to get a driver's license, public transport would become way more efficient. Well, again, like, you've got to be careful what you do with this stuff. And the application is hugely controversial because people say if you use IQ as a measure for things in actual human interaction, or if everybody knew everybody else's IQ, it would be a means of discriminating. Without doubt, it would be a means of discriminating, because you would far rather have someone with a high IQ doing a job than someone with a low one. So it's interesting to know this stuff. And again, I read this purely as someone who's interested in how the brain works. What about EQ, says Rebellious Ruth? Well, EQ is a bit of a made-up concept. There's no way to measure it, and therefore it's not particularly useful. There are personality tests you can do to determine whether or not someone has a more communicator or planner type personality, which would give them a higher EQ. Usually the analyst driver types do not. But I'm no expert in this field, and EQ is, as far as I know, not a scientific term. It is a psychological term, and it is used in pop psychology, and it's used by people in the workplace, and it's used by people in general society as a measure of your ability to be affable, likable, compromising, understanding, emotionally aware. All of that stuff is valuable, obviously. But as far as I know, you don't get an EQ score. And if you do get an EQ score and you want to correct me, please tell me where the literature is, and I'll be happy to go and read it. But it seems to me to be one of those things that's more pop psychology than it is science. And remember, that line is blurred, hey? That's why psychologists are not considered real scientists by people in neuroscience, but there is an overlap. There's obviously an overlap. They're both studying the brain from different areas. G-Star says EQ is a bullshit term used by people who cannot handle the IQ literature. Yeah, but if we only have IQ, we also have a problem. Because, as I said earlier, you can be a terrible person and have a very high IQ. I'm sure that a lot of awful people in history have had very high IQs. But your ability to get people to do things, your ability to get consensus on something, your ability to lead and gather people around you has very little to do with IQ, and a huge amount to do with your general emotional awareness and your ability to connect to people. It's not necessarily an IQ thing. So be careful not to say, well, this is the superior characteristic, and throw out all the others. I love Jordan Peterson, says Rebellious Ruth. He's such a straight arrow. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's also been weaponized by the right as a political agent, and he's been despised by the left. So you get people who denounce him as a complete fraud because they don't like his politics. And then you get people who praise him without ever bothering to actually listen to what he's saying, just because the end result of what he's saying suits their political narrative. Unfortunately, that's happening everywhere. And I have no doubt that even conversations about intelligence will be harnessed by political actors in order to be put to use in their favor. They'll either say, oh, well, it's all bullshit, we must abandon the whole idea, which is ridiculous because there isn't a better measure for general intelligence and success, as I mentioned earlier. Or they will say it's the only way we should measure things, and we should force everyone to do an IQ test, and we should just stratify society along those lines, which would be terrible. It would be no different to, to discriminating with people on the basis of looks, or the basis of skin color, or the basis of gender. Not a good idea. Trust me. Andy says Wayne Dyer is also great. I'm not familiar with Wayne Dyer, but I have heard the name. According to the stoned ape theory, you can improve your intellectual capabilities by chowing a few mushrooms. Well, yeah, the stoned ape theory is interesting. I don't know that there's been a whole lot of research done since that book was published. And the funny thing about IQ is, since the bell curve, which was Charles Murray's book, there hasn't been a whole lot of literature on IQ either, because people are terrified of studying this because they get into so much trouble. You have to go, as this professor who wrote the book said, you have to go where the data takes you. And sometimes it takes you into uncomfortable places. School should teach us how to think, or to think rather, and not to copy paste without thinking. Well, clearly, but I mean, so much of school is just really, really rudimentary stuff. And you don't even come out of school with a basic understanding. People come out of school with very low levels of literacy and numeracy in South Africa, which is something we should all be very concerned about. Monique says, I love this subject, Gareth. I think the school system fails us terribly. Yeah, it does. And according to all of this, it doesn't matter what school you go to. It can only make a 10% difference. Now, obviously, if you have a horrible school where the teachers are never there, and you never study, and there are no books, and you can't read, and you don't have access to the internet and all of that stuff, then you are at a tremendous disadvantage. But the entirety of that disadvantage will account for 10% of your overall intelligence if you're already beyond the age of, let's say, 12. And that's scary, because it means if you haven't done the important adjustments in early childhood, and if your genes are just not on your side, you got no chance of being the next Nobel Prize winner. That's just it. So it's an unfair thing, and people don't like unfairness, but that's unfortunately how it works, whether you like it or not. You just got to follow the data, right? Ethan says it's already a means of discrimination where intelligence, you don't need a test, which you can actually train for to tell your intelligence, the hoax of the Western world. No, that's bullshit, Ethan. It just is. I'm sorry. You're wrong. And that's a very unintelligent thing to say. Sharon says, does one's IQ change during the lifetime? No. As I said at the beginning, they did this test on Scottish kids, and they found that between age 12 and 18, there was very little movement of IQ up or down. Interestingly enough, they also found that there's a small bit of data around large families, and the fact that the eldest in those families is usually the more intelligent. So I can't wait to tell my brother and sister that, because I'm the eldest. But just marginally, they found that usually, and again, there's not enough research that's been done to corroborate this. In other words, it hasn't been replicated. But usually, the eldest is just a little bit higher in IQ than the rest, but it's not always true. So they found that there's a probability that the eldest will be the smartest, but it's not always true. So let's see. IQ is a cuck subject to study. It's so false. Well, you see, all you're doing is saying it's nonsense, but you're not giving me any evidence to the contrary. And I don't believe that you're a scholar of this stuff, Ethan. It does actually matter what school you go to. No, it doesn't. I'm telling you what I've read. You're welcome to take on this professor if you have any other innovative, thoughtful research, but I don't believe you've done any. So you're going to just throw it out because you know better? You're wrong, he says. No, I'm telling you what I've read. I'm not saying this is true. This is what I've read from someone who's studied this stuff his entire life. He's just retired. Go and read the book, Ethan, and then tell me what you think. But you haven't read the book, and you're just arguing with me because you don't like the conclusions. All right, let's get Ben in here, and let's see what Ben has to say. Hey, morning, Ben. How are you?
Screw you, Ethan.
Yeah. No, he just says you're wrong. You're just wrong.
That's funny. Yeah, pretty good. Thanks, Gareth. Pretty good. Interesting subject about IQ. I've always wanted to take an IQ test. I don't think I ever have. I'm quite curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna reveal some, like, if you've always thought you were a bit dumb and then you go and do the test and then it proves it to you, is it going to make you feel better or make you feel worse? And
Yeah.
if you've what I would love is for people who think they're really, really smart to go and sit down and do one and come back with like a terrible result and then humbles them a little bit. That's fun. I think that's necessary.
Yeah. But the whole thing about school, like I always thought, and I think we talked about this, but I always thought homeschool was really bad. But actually, geez, if it's like there's certain schools you go to nowadays, and just think like kids, they'll go to school now and they'll be taught
Yeah.
about this pronoun bullshit. And that's
Yeah.
going to mess you up for life. And there's certain
Of
things
course.
because schooling now is so cut and pasty, and we aren't encouraged to think at all because thinking is very right wing and murderous to a lot of people. I think
Yeah.
homeschooling, like if you've got the means, the capacity, and the interests, that could actually be really good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just I think that existing on Earth is it's a partly struggle and it's partly the most amazing thing that you could experience, right? And you have to decide if you're going to let it be mostly struggle in your head or let it be the most exciting adventure you could ever go on, because there's a healthy balance. Like it's important that you realize that it's not always going to be easy, and that when things aren't going your way, that's not the universe ganging up on you or being unlucky or it's everyone else's fault. It's just part of what you're here to learn. And at the same time, if you just go through it like it's it's a terrible struggle, you're just never going to have any enjoyment, and your life's going to be pretty depressing. So find that healthy medium, and then you can have a good life. You can have a meaningful life, and it doesn't always have to be about intelligence, success, good looks, athletic achievements, awards, the whole world liking you or not liking you. Sometimes it's just about your own sense of satisfaction. So there's a lot to talk about there. But I do think this intelligence thing is fascinating, and I will be reading more books about it because this one was very absorbing. I made it through it in about 3 or 4 days. Anyway.
Yeah, the thing about intelligence that people just think it's like you are or you aren't. And yeah, many people should get more into it. But just to finish off in that school thing, like most schools are just so cookie cutterish, and you just get you get made into a certain thing. But if like there's technical needs, like if your kid has special needs, then sure, there's certain schools that have to be sent to. If you want to play a certain sport and sport's going to be the upbringing that you want for your kid, you have to go to certain schools. And that is like, those things are obviously not for debate. Those are true.
Yeah, but
like
those have nothing to do with intelligence. So what this guy's doing is he's measuring it, and he's looking purely at intelligence, and he's also got an interest in consciousness. And those are the only 2 areas he cares about. So this book is about those. It's not about raising the next generation of, kind, caring, thoughtful adults. That takes a lot more than just IQ. He's just looking at a measure of general intelligence, and across all the variables, trying to figure out what it is that we can do to improve or to change someone's intelligence. And it turns out not very much. So I think that's interesting. Anyway, so that's what I've been reading. And now we spent a whole half hour talking about it. So there's lots more to get into.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. We'll have to see. Monique says, I wonder what the IQ was of ancient Greek philosophers. Has that been researched? Well, it's very difficult to do because you can't sit them down and make them do an IQ test.
Yeah, they're a bit dead.
They're a bit dead. And, you can say, for example, that someone like Pythagoras was tremendous as a problem solver. He came up with equations for us to measure and to be able to figure out basic geometry. So he must have been a very smart guy.
Was he a problem solver or a problem maker? Because trust me, through high school, that dickhead got me all kinds of problems.
That's also true. Did you know that IQ is inversely related to penis size? Says Rajesh. I'm hung like a horse. Well, they're doing research. And this is again somewhere where you get into trouble just for asking these questions. If you have more kids, are they all going to be more or less intelligent than if you have one kid? And it's not the answer that I think you expect in the minimal amount of research that has been done around this. They say there's no effect across the board for whether you have many or one kid. Because people often think, well, if I have the one child, I can really put all the effort into this child and make sure that it's, you often see like single child families where they put an enormous amount of pressure and time and effort and energy into this kid, and then they end up just being pretty ordinary. I mean, not all only kids are tremendous. We all know this. We all know some only kids. Some of them are fantastic, but then sometimes the fifth kid in a family of 7 is an absolute genius through no effort of the parents. They made no effort whatsoever, because it was the 5th out of 7. They basically let the other kids raise that one, and it's smart. So
yeah, that's the thing.
A lot of this is just in the genes.
Like parenting is also quite a lot of guiding. If you push the kid too hard into certain things, that's when they become drug addicts and layabouts. You give them a bit of time to grow. It's like when you grow grapes for wine in vineyards, you don't water that thing every single day. You let it almost die, basically. So it has to really fight for survival. And in order to do so with the limited amount of resources, it produces wonderful grapes that make, obviously, wonderful wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar with kids, I think, on a slightly separate note.
Let's just leave this intelligence thing alone for another day, because I don't want to go too deep into the reads. I've already explained some of the basic findings that I took out of the book, but you're welcome to go and read it for yourself and tell me what you think of it. It's called The Neuroscience of Intelligence, The Intelligent Brain. It's by Richard J. Haier, H-A-I-E-R. Go and take a listen. Tell us what you think. All right. Let's see. We've got a couple of things on the agenda for this morning. There's something that Ben and I have been wanting to talk about for a very long time. Why is it that when women do bodybuilding, not become like fitness models, because that's a different thing entirely, but why is it that when women become bodybuilders, they get very, very deep voices? Is it because they take steroids? Is it because they take testosterone? Or is it because the muscles change the sound of their voice? And maybe that comes after the steroids and the testosterone. So it could be a combination of those things. But I've got a couple of clips to play for you, and you tell us what you think. I mean, I'll start off with someone who's not a bodybuilder. Her name is Charlotte, and she's got a very, very deep voice. She lives in Melbourne, Australia, and here she is in this video complaining about how people are mean to her because she has a deep voice. And I always think it's really funny if a man has a squeaky high voice, and I think it's really funny if a girl has a deep, like powerful, male-like sounding voice. But it's something, what are you going to do? Charlotte here is not a bodybuilder, but I do think it would be interesting to hear her voice. And then we've got 2 others. Here's Charlotte. Take a listen to her.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. For those that don't know, I'm 22 years old and I am from Australia, specifically Melbourne. I'm just going to briefly run down what I've been through in my lifetime. All through high school, I was picked on because of my voice. I was called a male. I was called transgender. I was called that I wasn't going to ever meet someone, that I was going to be single for the rest of my life, that I was going to die alone. I'd have food thrown at me in class, I would have chairs thrown at me, I would have bruises on my body, and it was just an awful time in my life. And yet still to this day, I get bullied. And I just think, why do it? Are you that unhappy with yourself that you just feel the need to make someone feel like
Yeah. All right. So pretty funny voice. I can't help when I hear someone like that laughing, and I wouldn't have thrown a chair at her, but I probably would have laughed. So
if I was her dog, I would not get lost in the park. Imagine that chick shouting at you for like an hour.
Oh, Rover, come on. Sound like Thanos.
That's pretty rough. She's obviously a sweetheart, but that voice is that's something. Deep. But to throw a chair. Wow. I mean, between the two of us, we say some shitty things, but imagine who you've got to be to throw a chair at someone because you hate their voice. Wow.
So I've got 2 bodybuilders. The one is interviewing the other one. They both have quite deep voices, but not as deep as you'd expect. And then there's a Russian woman that I'll play for you, and you can figure out whether you think maybe she's got a deeper voice than is usual. So here's the interview one. First of all, both of these girls, bodybuilders. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. You'll always get great stuff like this that you won't get anywhere else. But take a look at these 2 and then listen to them.
To tell you, didn't mean Brooke Walker here, and I'm at the 2020 IFBB Optimum Classic Pro in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I'm here with Women's Physique Pro, Caridad Sola.
Doing good. I'm happy to finally be here. It's been quite a challenge with the hurricane and everything thrown at our way this year. I got really lucky. I originally had to fly in Thursday. I changed it to Wednesday just to have more time to settle in. Had no idea storm was coming. So I would say November.
I'm going to stop it there anyway. I mean, that's enough. No, she doesn't have a deep voice, but that's definitely a strange tone. Don't you think?
So there's two things. And again, maybe I should have done more scientific research here, but you get the deep voice, which I reckon is just down to hormonal kind of things. But then you get the sort of like almost deep into squeaky trumpet voice. And I almost believe that out of all the heavy lifting, all the heavy squatting and deadlift, that the vocal cords actually become like strained because you're going, and you're constantly pushing out groans and things. I think it's something along those lines and then what happens is that your body is trying to fight back and try to be feminine so hard that it just throws whatever it can at the deepness, and then it becomes squeaky.
And you said trumpety. I think that's a good word.
It is quite trumpety.
Yeah. All right, let's just look at the comments quickly before we move on. Hanging out with Jay says there are clearly some on testosterone and supplements, because wow. Why is there always an echo when you play clips? I'm not sure. I think it could be because I put my mic on. Never understood bullying. Like, what the fuck? You mad that I'm ugly? Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense. Her jaw looks very manly. Yes, but that is, again, Ben, that has to be hormone steroids, right? Has to be.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. I mean, you just keep producing this testosterone artificially. Your body does change. That's all it does. You become more manly. I mean, there's no other way to say it. You become more manly.
Let's listen to this Russian girl, because she's definitely the most manly voice I've ever heard, and she's also a bodybuilder, fitness woman. But this is in terms of contrast, this is the best one so far.
The powerful female bodybuilder amazed the world by setting a deadlift record of 530 pounds and a bench press record of 375 pounds.
Вот, ну, безусловно, люди, конечно, обращают внимание, потому что, спортивную фигуру видно под одеждой. Вот, но многие меня уже узнают, то есть, потому что довольно известно и здесь, и за границей, то есть, просят там фотографироваться, многие меня уже по имени знают. Ну, конечно, я думаю, любая женщина.
That's enough. I think she also...
What do you mean that's enough? Some guys were like getting into that.
I think she also has a speech impediment, so it's hard to, figure. That's a deep voice, man. That's a very deep voice. She's got something going on there.
Like when she's on the phone to someone, that's clearly a man. Clearly.
Well, if you see, again, like, this is why the world of transgender is so interesting, because people will get upset with you. But if that woman, who is a woman, and she's not a man who transitioned into a woman, so she wasn't born biologically male. She's female. She's always been female, as I understand it. If she called a place for a takeout meal, and she said, "Hi, it's me. I'm ordering for," yes, sir. And she probably gets that all the time. And I wonder if she gets upset when they call her sir, as opposed to ma'am.
So, Gareth, I've got a slightly different take on all this, because, I mean, the voices are quite something, because that poor woman in Australia, she literally fucking woke up with that. She has no choice. Right. She's bad Thanos by birth. She just didn't have any luck. But I always believe that life and society in the world is always fighting for balance. For all this stupid fuckery, there's people who are hugely intelligent who are going the other way. For all, like, throughout civilization, right? So I want to know, were there like female bodybuilders, and were there so many of them back when, as they say, men were men, as in like tougher times, like when men were going off to fighting wars, were girls going to the gym to go deadlift 500 kilograms? Of course
we
not.
already know the answer to that. It's no. Women bodybuilders have always been a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the total female population, and it's probably at the highest it's ever been now.
But
what do you think? What do you think that's because of?
But that's exactly my point. I reckon they're at the highest now. And obviously the internet has made them more visible, which is obviously a thing. But I think because men are probably softer and more feminine, lost now than ever, there's more women bodybuilders and more women who are going to gym and doing these kind of things. I don't have the numbers. This is Friday science. But I really believe that the more you see of this is a reflection of where men are, because it's always working in a balance. And it's not because every woman's like, well, I also want to lift weights. No woman wants to lift weights. No one grow up going, yeah, I really want to deadlift 500 kilograms. That's a really, really, really niche thing. But the more that they get sort of like put into a position where they need to be stronger in life because men aren't, I reckon this is the byproduct.
Do you think it's a symptom of men becoming more simpering and weak?
Absolutely. Like
let's call that Prince Harry syndrome, shall we?
Yes.
To give it a name, so that we can all so we can be clear what we're talking about when we bring it up in a greater context later on. So we can say it's Prince Harry syndrome.
So then to go even further, then we could say those women have Prince Harry voices. It's voices brought on by the Prince Harry syndrome.
All right. I mean, maybe that's a good theory. We'd have to test it out and under laboratory conditions, figure out whether that's the reason that so many women are becoming bodybuilders. If there is an increase, which we don't know, it might also be very fashionable at the moment. You know, like high heel shoes have become more or less fashionable at certain times in human history, or like a short dress or long dress. There might be an explanation simpler than we think.
Yeah, but I mean, like high heels and a short dress and a long dress, those are purchases that anyone can do. Being a bodybuilder is damn hard. It's a commitment. It's a life. It's a complete change of everything that you do. Everyone thinks that, I'll just take steroids or whatever and I'll get muscles. No, that's not how it works. You have to work so hard to get muscles, even if you are on steroids. So it's not really a trend. I think people are physically changing because of their environment.
You just said something interesting, and I think that I didn't immediately think this, and it's not something that seems intuitive or all that obvious. Just taking testosterone or steroids is not going to give you muscles. You still have to do the exercise, right?
Completely, absolutely.
If you just take those things and you don't do exercise, you just become a marshmallow.
Well, I mean, look, it's always different because everyone's got a different hormonal breakdown and sort of mixed. And some people have really good genetics and are just quite well muscled. But your average person to go and jab something in your ass, you're not suddenly going to get amazing traps and delts and pec and all that kind of stuff. You really have to work. You have to. And
because I do hear like a lot of people who hate fit people, and there are people like that, just like there are people who hate fat people, and just like that there are people who don't like short people or whatever. There are, everybody has their prejudices, whether they're fair or not. That's up to the audience. But I hear a lot of people saying, well, they just take a lot of steroids, but they kind of write them off as being shortcut people who don't actually exercise. But you're telling me you need to take them in combination to get enormously big.
Yeah. Look, I will say categorically, I will never take steroids. I probably won't even take growth hormone, although when you get older, everyone seems to do it. All of Hollywood's been on that, and that's why those guys still have hairlines. But no, I mean, you have to work so incredibly hard. Like I had a podcast recently with Clinton van der Berg, who wrote a book. He wrote a book about steroid use and basically drug cheats in sports. And it's a very murky kind of place. Like you've got to be so committed. Don't just think you can do steroids for like a couple of weeks and see how it goes. If you really want the benefits, so when you see those big people who get written off as just steroid users, sure, they are taking shortcuts, they are taking steroids, they are taking extra. But shit, they've worked hard. They really have.
Well, when you brought Clinton into the studio, I was at the office, and it was interesting to meet him. And I was curious about what I haven't listened to the episode yet, but I'm going to. You spent a fair amount of time with him, and you've read the book. It sounds like a really interesting study. It sounds like something that we should be paying attention to.
Well, people have been cheating, Gareth, since for a long time. Okay, and the thing about sport is that it's a reflection of society. So if we have criminals and corruption and all that kind of stuff in general society, trust me, it's going to be in sport, and we see it now because I believe this transgender stuff, that's basically it's cheating like anything else. you're getting unfair advantages. So just to very briefly give you like understanding of what drugs and sport actually mean is that people test for drugs because they want to prevent people from taking something that gives them an advantage. It harms them potentially, or it's against the spirit of sport. So in my mind, if you're rocking up with a cock, that's against the spirit of women's sport. It's not a scientific take. That's just me being by the book. So it's such an interesting. I had such an interesting chat with him, and I wish I could have chatted longer. But the book is great because it's not like a salacious tabloidy rant about Lance Armstrong this or Ben Johnson that. It's breaking into the lives of like everyone makes a choice in life and everything they do, and people make a choice to take these drugs. They look at it and go, I might not be able to keep being a sports person unless I do this right now. And yes, I might get bust for it, but if I don't get bust, I can prolong my career. If I do get bust, I'm fine, I'm banned, okay? But that might be the same exact situation if I don't get stronger. And schoolboy sports, SA rugby is a major thing at high school level. And steroid use is just so prolific
among school kids.
Yeah, but the most interesting thing about this is that a lot of steroid use is from kids who don't actually play sport. They just want to get big for the holidays.
That's amazing. So it's not to do with being in the first team rugby team or being selected as a, young Springbok or whatever. It's really just to look good on the beach.
That's exactly what it is. And you'll see it more and more. I mean, now that I've read this book and I've had this long chat with Clinton, and I look at steroids very differently. I'm very, very curious about it. And like I said to him, like what happens if Usain Bolt had to start doing this? Like what could have been the outcome? And I always believe, like, if you look at sports entertainment, right? And I've always said this, it's nothing more special than that. It's people entertaining, just like movie stars. So what if there was like a year where we took certain athletes? So if you look in golf right now, there's this breakaway thing called the Live Golf, which we all spoken about. It's basically millions of Saudi money, and guys in their prime are taking that and going. So what if, again, maybe let's go to the Saudis for this. What if they spend all this money to take top athletes right now, and for a season with awesome doctors and that kind of stuff, gave them a chance to just take the right steroids, do everything perfectly? I would love to see, and it literally is. It's like a school of excellence, right? Cheating, but they basically do their own Olympics and they set their own drug world records. That would be the most watched sporting event on earth.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
The drug Olympics, but like with proper doctors.
If you did the normal Olympics and you did the drug Olympics, the audiences for one would be a quarter of the audiences for the other, and you can guess which one would be bigger. I just want to quickly go to this before we wrap up this hour. I mean, this has been really interesting. Vincent says, my sticky had a voice like an angel, and it changed over time while doing bodybuilding. I know that she's on the juice. She's still a woman, I think. Vincent, you bastard. It's unbelievable. Sam says, I can't speak for all the girls, but I weightlift because I find it fun. It's probably the Scottish in me. Hey, listen, we're not saying there's anything wrong with bodybuilding. I mean, certainly not. I think, there's something admirable about it. As Ben said, it's a life. If you throw yourself at anything and you become the best at it, who the hell are we to criticize you? You could quite easily point the finger back at us and say, well, it's hardly like you two fucking great specimens. And we would deserve it.
Yeah. So, yeah. But obviously there's levels. There's like big thing between lifting weights and like those girls that we showed you just now. That's something else. It really is something else.
Some guys are into that, hey? Vincent says you have to work hard to gain muscle. Then you have to take the steroids to help you get bigger faster. Oh, and your pecker shrinks. Vincent's on fire this morning.
Well, Vincent's not wrong either.
It's true, right? It does shrink your balls and you.
It kind of shrinks your balls. It doesn't shrink your actual beef, so to speak. But
Linda says, I still think Gareth had the best idea years ago. One Olympics where everyone gets tested, and the second one they can take whatever they want. Yeah, and look, if their hearts end up exploding 10 minutes after the race, but they won in like record time, what a way to go if that's what you've dedicated your life to.
Yeah, but if you do but that's the thing. It's like this isn't an 80s movie. If you do it right, like it's healthier to do the Tour de France on drugs than it's not. So if you do it right with the right doctors, yeah, well, The Tour de France is not a healthy thing to do. It's very bad for you, really, really bad for you, because you can never recoup the calories that you spend. You're losing bone density, I'm sure, because of all the exertion. It's a really shit thing to do for 2 weeks of your life. And that's why they all look like concentration camp victims when they're finished.
Yeah.
So if you're on the drugs, it's actually healthier. So with the right doctors, you could have the doping games and nobody would die. They would just be really, really, really amazing.
Parallel Parking says, working with weights, even if only the weight of your own body, becomes important as we age to keep our bones strong. Everyone needs to weightlift at some point or fade and fall over.
Yeah, it's like I've always said to people my age now, it's like they go, oh, I run 5Ks 3 times a week. It's like, well, you might as well sit in the toilet because it's so bad. You need to have resistance training in your life. Otherwise, you're going to lose the bone density. And then you fall over when you're old. And also,
bones crack.
Yeah, I mean, you can't 5K someone up. You can't 5K like a kid off a ledge. You got to lift, push, pull, fight, do forceful things in life. 5Ks.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Speaking of which, says Boiled Prawn Shack, I see that Leah Thomas has been nominated by Penn State for NCAA Woman of the Year. I wonder how history will judge us. I almost think that is a kind of overreaction by left-wing people at Penn State because she has been thrown out of competing against other women. So I think they're almost doing this as kind of a fuck you, which is fine. I mean, people are going to do that.
No, but it's also just Penn State, as they say, trying to get on the right side of this. This is the terminology.
Yeah. You see, so many people just want to be liked. They just want everyone to think they're nice people. And if you boil everything down, from the conversation about intelligence to whether or not you take steroids to improve your body, to having a deep voice or a squeaky voice or a trumpety one, everybody in the world, with very few exceptions, they just want to be thought of as a nice person. That's all. They just want people to go, oh, well, Ben is a nice person. Gareth's a nice person. Ethan, Ruth, Lawrence, Clint, they're all nice. They're nice people, which I think is just such a low barrier to entry and such a if that's all you're aiming for, then once you've achieved it, then what? I mean, where do you move on from there? Because that's kind of low-hanging fruit, don't you think? To be a nice person, to have people think that you're a good person.
If you look after kids, cool, be nice. Outside of that, you don't need me to be nice.
Looking after kids is the only place you need to be nice. Is that it, Ben?
Yeah, well, you want to drop your kids off at a place where people are nice. Outside of that, I don't need you to be nice. Just be good. Be good at something of value. That's what I'm constantly searching for. I haven't found it yet, but
as long as you find one thing that you're good at,
but be good at it, because then you're adding value to society. Again, I'm still busy with that, and if I come close.
Well, we've got some interesting stuff in the next hour for you, including how people meet in 2022 as opposed to in previous years. We'll talk about emoji history and a whole lot more. So stick around. Joey Rasdien also is going to be joining us. So that's awesome. Aware Massacre coming up next. That's Joey Rasdien with
this
Ben
week
and I.
on the Auto Trader podcast.
So we have a product on Auto Trader called Vehicle Check.
Well, that's not it's not a physical inspection, right? It's a history check.
It's a history check. So this is, and I think it's important to note that is something completely different. However, how does that work? So that looks at the vehicle's VIN data,
and then whatever data is captured on about the car,
yes,
we try and gather. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
It's the decade that just won't go away, mainly because we won't let it. It's That 80s Show, the show that taste forgot. Every Friday, Paolo and Dory remember the 80s. Movies, music, fashion, Wham, Beachies, and the Hoff. If it was acceptable in the 80s, it will get you cancelled today. That 80s Show. New episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on cliffcentral.com.
Yes, 80s. That's what we need more of in our life. We've spent a lot of time this week talking about like how the 80s have come back thanks to Stranger Things.
Yeah.
But there are good reasons we should keep the 80s at bay. There are some terrible fashions, and and there are things about the 80s which are embarrassing beyond belief. I mean, if you watch some of those TV shows now, you think, oh, this is such crap. But we loved them. Some of them have dated so badly. Others are still fresh. Very few are still fresh. Let's be honest. Oh, man.
Yeah, but we certainly loved them because there was nothing else. Like the TV show was it. It was it. It's all we had.
Right. So a couple of things that I wanted to get to this morning, because we didn't have you here last week, Ben, and these were things that were kind of left over from the previous week. So first of all, I thought of this because you and Gord and I were talking about how you meet people, and Gord sent me like a couple of screenshots of he's in, I think he's in Germany at the moment, and he sent these screenshots of like these terrible girls who he's meeting there, who have like profile pictures of like wine. I mean, look at this. That's her profile picture on Tinder. Wine.
Yeah, that's me.
She's 42. There's one here who's 45, and she's got like, this is her profile picture. This is quite scary. It's like a broken Barbie doll type thing. It's like
that's the one. That's the one.
Mary, who's 48, and then this is another Mary. But look at that picture. I mean, that's terrifying. Ooh. It's like a spider monster type thing. Awful,
I thought Joburg Tinder was bad. This is horrendous.
Apparently German Tinder's even worse. But anyway, I thought this was quite interesting. I found this graph the other day, how couples meet in the USA. So obviously online is the one that you could see going up tremendously towards the end there. So obviously online only started in like the late 1990s, really, early on in the internet. There were still some nerds who met each other.
Sex in the City days, basically.
Yeah, so 1995, it really started to accelerate. Then it evened out and leveled out somewhere just around 2010, but then it took off even faster after that. And now, really, if you don't meet someone online, where are you going to meet them? I mean, it's everything else has gone down.
That is
exception,
so interesting. Hey, like meeting at a bar is still a thing.
Meeting at a bar is still a thing. In fact, what you can see from that is that meeting at a bar or restaurant is still on the way up. It's actually quite a good one. Not nearly as much as meeting online, but meeting through friends has gone down. That's decelerated quite precipitously since 2000. Meeting through or as co-workers is now frowned upon, so that's died completely. I mean, I don't think anybody actually wants to meet their significant other as a co-worker or through co-workers, because it's just complicated. You want to keep working.
Fuck it. I'm in. You got to be romantic. You got to be romantic in life, Cliff. You can't choose where you're going to meet someone special. It's like, you're very nice, but I met you in a Zoom call, so you know what? I'm not going to talk to you.
Okay. All right.
You don't get a shot at love every single week. Stop talking like it's something on the menu.
All right. Well, the next four are the ones that have gone the most dramatically down. Met through family, gone right down. I mean, if you consider since 1940, that's just basically straight downhill at 45 degrees.
Yeah, I've been no one through my family. My family really failed me there.
Met in primary or secondary schools also just diminished horribly because
that means the pedos are down, which is good.
Yeah. Met in college has also gone down. Neighbors, people meet as neighbors and end up being husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend.
I think that's just love affairs spawned from the Australian soapy.
Oh, okay. All right. And then Met in Church is also one category, but that's also not looking great at the moment. So the most likely way you'll meet someone is online. Second most likely is probably in a bar or restaurant, then through friends. And the rest you just don't even bother.
The rest would be happy coincidences or anomalies, really. Yeah, but the whole thing about meeting online is that we've spoken about this. It's all about getting like bat on ball, basically. You're not going to have the most incredible conversation or connection potentially, but it could get you to go to a date. It could get you to go to a place.
Right.
And it should be seen as that. So like Gord's, those 3 women that you just showed me right now, Gord's being very superficial. That bottle of wine could mean anything. That little baby doll doesn't mean you're going to lose your kidney straight away. You know? Have a bit of faith, Gord.
Oh, man.
Give love a chance.
Yeah. Marty says, oh, come on. The 80s was the best. Now it's all woke nonsense. Well, your parents said the 60s were the best. And your children will say that the 2020s are the best. So everybody thinks their generation's the best.
Yeah, I reckon we've hit a tipping point where today's generations will say the other ones were the best.
You think so? You think we're going backwards now?
Well, because we haven't got any new original music. Movies are mostly remade or woke as shit. No, I mean, these very recycled and shitty generations. Until we start talking out of different holes, or I don't know, life has to change dramatically. Because I mean, look at Gareth. Unfortunately, as humans, we've peaked. That's why there's all this crap right now. We've peaked as humans, and everything is just basically rearranging the paper at the moment.
Carl says, Gareth, you blocked me for 10 minutes last week and then never unblocked me. What is life without my comments on Cliff Central? Put me back. I don't think I blocked you. If I did, it was by mistake. Or it could have been someone else. It could have been Simpiwe for all I know. Blame her. Blame Simpiwe. She's always here. She's always watching things. She's well within her rights to just block you if she decides you're boring. Ethan says, my grandparents don't think their generation is the best. They grew up in apartheid. Well, thanks for that, Ethan. So here's an interesting story. Apparently, I mean, this is something nobody ever could have predicted, right? Teens shun traditional news channels for TikTok and Instagram. Dun, da, da, da. Breakthrough. Nobody could have guessed that. That's incredible. What great research. Imagine all the studies they've conducted to try and figure that one out. So teens are not watching traditional news channels, and they're rather watching TikTok and Instagram. Who knew? This comes from Ofcom, which is the national regulator. It's like the what do they call it in this country? The broadcasting, no, not the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, although that's part of it. No, it's like the Independent Broadcasting Authority that used to be the IBA. That's what Ofcom is. So they've somehow someone at Ofcom has just woken up to the fact that no one's watching news on television. I mean, I wish I could break it to them earlier, but they obviously weren't paying attention. It's amazing, right? That's just, I mean, there's nothing revolutionary about that, yet it makes the news.
Yeah, it's just funny the way it's phrased. Kids shun news networks. They were never into it to be shunned. It was never part of the equation to be shunned.
Yeah, it's funny how like upset traditional media outlets are that they're not getting all the love that they used to, or that people don't believe them anymore. Like you see these news anchors, not so much in South Africa, but certainly in America, and they're genuinely upset and offended and hurt by the fact that nobody takes them seriously anymore. They actually get like really they get all stroppy on their shows. So that you'll see they're like, but you know, you can't be watching these other things because you can't be listening to podcasts for your information. You can't be going on TikTok or Instagram. You have to listen to me. They don't have newsrooms. They're like, well, we don't need your newsrooms anymore.
Yeah,
because we can find the information ourselves. It's
a strange arrogance around the fact that they think they got the monopoly on stuff. And I think that's why people have hated you so much over the years, because rather than, and today we're going to talk about this with a voice like this, you just got in there and did your own thing. And people hated you because like, hang on a second. No, you can't do that. You need to do it like this. And you were like, get fucked.
I'm sure some of them had a good reason to hate me too, but I mean, that's probably true as well. I mean, I didn't exactly go around trying to be nice to everybody, did I?
No,
So here's
exactly.
a history of the emoji. This is interesting. The short history of the emoji, the number of emojis by year and release of notable emojis. This is amazing. So we start off in 1995, where this is the amazingly there were only 76. Again, this is the number of emojis per year. So there are only 76 available emojis in the year 1995. I don't think I'd used emojis in 1995. I think I probably only started using them in maybe around 2004, 5, somewhere around there, because I didn't have a phone that could use emojis and I didn't use them in normal text. You know, there were those people who would use like the wink is the semicolon and the close bracket. Like I never did that until they actually made them into emojis. It wasn't a thing that I did. You?
Yeah, no, likewise, because then if you do it in a certain computer, it would turn into a J. And I was like, why are these dickheads finishing every sentence with a J?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't understand that either. So in the beginning, there was the skull, there was the wink, and the frown face. Sorry, the frown face, not the wink. And then the it's okay kind of, peace sign, which is the two fingers in the air. Then somewhere in 2003, they used the lightning bolt. Then the poo emoji entered common usage in 2010. Did you know that? The poo emoji only came about in 2010?
So basically, as you see there, the poo and the cock came in at 2010, and that's basically when the emojis, that was it. That was
really
the dawn.
started to go up. Yeah. I mean, only once the poo and the cock had entered the conversation did it start to go somewhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll get into which emojis have been the most impactful in life. But again, once you give something to people to use and they have a use for it, then everything else just absolutely spreads from there. Because from there, there were...
Well, after that,
there were 1,000, right? Now there's 3,500.
So then they started with the thumbs up in all the different colors of all the different tones of skin, from very light. There was the yellow one for starters, because everyone was yellow in the beginning, like the Simpsons. And then there was a very, very black one. There was a middle kind of chocolatey one. And there was a more caramel one. Then there was a Nicole Kidman, blinding white one. So there were all kinds of different colors. And then flags entered the fray in about 2017.
I'm still waiting for the freckle. I'm still waiting for the freckle skin emoji. I think that's absolutely ridiculous that hasn't got a ginger skin yet.
Yeah, and then the trans flag enters in 2020, and the pink heart. Now, did you know, Ben? I didn't know this about emojis. This is something someone taught me the other day. Apparently, all the different hearts mean different things. Like if you use the blue heart, it's like a friendship heart. If you use the pink one, it's like I think that's like romantic. If you use the red heart, it's pure love. I don't know what they all mean, but somebody said to me that each of the heart colors, and you'll see on your phone if you go to emojis, that each of them means something different.
Yeah, sure. And if I was a 14-year-old girl, I would be into that.
So Asha says, I love that there is such a thing as the Emojipedia. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Steve just says
there was the emoji.
Cock, then the rain, or the moisture one, and then the peach. So he just wants to have anal sex with somebody by the looks of things.
That's a lot. Yeah.
If I'm reading that right. Steve, just correct me if I'm wrong there.
There was also the emoji movie, which obviously then put it further into pop culture. But there's something quite interesting that Joe Rogan spoke about a while ago, that like initial cave people had the cave paintings, and that's how they communicated about certain things. And everything in life goes full circle. And like I said, I think we've peaked as humans, so now we're going back to that. And some people only talk in emojis. It's like a new language. It's a new way of expressing ourselves.
Red heart is, according to Boiled Prawn Shack, pure hangover. But I think he's talking about the rum. And Yonder says, imagine the poo and the cock were invented in the same year. They were. I wonder what they were thinking about when they came up with those two. Well, they both entered the Emojipedia at the same time. So the poo and the cock were at the same time.
Yonder, the poo and the aubergine were invented in the same year. People like us turned it into a cock, and I would like to know what year that was.
Ben, can I ask you something? Who on earth uses the peach for peaches and the cock for aubergines? No one.
No one.
No one. I don't think
Absolutely
anyone,
not.
when they use that purple aubergine thing, they're not thinking of an eggplant. No.
But it's kind of funny if, like, someone had to innocently say, like, they were making an eggplant something or other, and they have a friend coming around, and they were like, "Oh shit, I didn't have any eggplant," and the person says, "Can I bring anything tonight?" And you just respond with the eggplant emoji. That would be pretty funny.
Yeah, then you know exactly what they're
How
up
do you
to.
take that?
Yeah,
How do you take that?
Well, Joey Rasdien is a comedian, a writer, and an actor. He's no stranger to cliffcentral.com. We always love talking to Joey, and he's been on just recently, along with Riyad Musa, but he's busy, man. He's busy. He's also just done a podcast with our own Gary Hertzberg from Laws of Life, which I'll tell you about in a moment or two. It's hilarious. It's only 4 to 5 minutes long, but it's called Insurance Law Spotlight. And if there's anyone who can make anything funny, it's Joey. Even he is, he's so incredibly talented that if you could take insurance law, is there anything more dry in the world? Make that funny, then you're the funniest guy in the universe. We don't need to tell him that he already knows. How's it, Joey?
How's it, Gareth? How Ben?
Joey, hi. How's it, man? Good to see you.
All right. Good to see you, man. I thought I'd see you on a golf course, but yeah.
Well, yeah, Joey, you never invite me, so what am I supposed to do? Just start hounding you?
No, but I normally see you at places, and yeah, I haven't seen you at places.
Joey,
I thought I see you
Joey,
at one tournament.
I'm 40 and white, so I don't get invited to those things anymore.
Hey, my player, OG Molefe took your spot.
Hey, listen, Joey, Ben actually played. I saw him playing golf yesterday. Didn't you go yesterday?
Yeah, Stain City.
Stain City. Oh, wow. Oh, now. No. Stain City don't invite me anymore. There's certain things that went missing. The croissants.
Oh, man. Joey, how are you? What's been happening, man?
I've been great. Yeah, I did that podcast with Gary about insurance law, and it's actually quite interesting. Some of the stuff that people claim for. Yeah, I didn't know.
But you're one of the only people in the universe that has the power to make insurance law funny. I didn't say it wasn't interesting, but you make it funny, which is great.
Thank you for that.
If you want to listen to it, it's called Insurance Law Spotlight. You'll find it on cliffcentral.com, and it's presented by Gary Hertzberg, who you remember from The Laws of Life, and the brilliant Joey Rasdien. Yeah, man, it's nice that we're talking to you again. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a while. The last time I spoke to you, yes, that was a nice conversation, but it was on the TV show. It was.
That's right.
Yes, it wasn't the Cliff Central, but now I'm back on. Guys, last night I went to the Canyon Power Roast. Yeah.
Did they record it last night? Okay, because I spoke to him pop-ups last Friday, I think it was, and we actually had 2 weeks ago. We had him pop-ups on, who was the host, and then we also spoke to who else was doing it? Because we had someone else on the show who's also on the roast. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Saul?
No, how did it go? How did it go?
John Rasmus, my goodness. Yeah, no, he's not a legend for nothing, eh?
Really? Did he pull out
all the that's hey, my goodness. John, King. Even Celeste and Tully did really well.
Sorry, we had Celeste on the other day. God, she's funny.
Yeah. So obviously Celeste was and Mpo, obviously. Mpo did really. Yeah, the writing team was. So I only got home. The only problem is the thing they said you have to be there at 6 o'clock to collect your tickets. And then the thing ended at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah, you see, that drove me crazy when we did the Somizi one. The same thing. They're just incapable of doing these things in time. I don't know why that. How long did you wait with nothing going on? You were probably sitting there for hours, right?
Yes. That's why I liked COVID, because you there 11 o'clock we must be finished.
Yeah.
Now these people are like, there's no COVID, there's no curfew, we can go on. And this is not a Shabin or a tavern, so we're safe. So we can go on. So that's
you're gonna be careful. People are going to get upset if you start talking about how dangerous taverns and Shabins are. Listen, do you use emojis? Because we were talking about this just before you came on, and we were talking about which emojis you use the most. If I look at mine, my most used emojis, if I go in here now, are the thumbs up, the laughing face, the heart, the party. You know that cone with the confetti.
Yeah.
With the party thing. The bicep one, which is like yes, Zobastrom, right? The winking face and the pointy finger. Or if I send someone a picture and I say, look at this, then I use the pointy. Those are my most used ones. Pick yours quickly, Ben. Pick yours as well, Joey. See which ones you use the most. I want to see.
Yeah, I generally always go with the bicep because I'm projecting hard. The guy with the hand going like that, just for obviously work messages, because I do that a lot. Yeah, like unfortunately, I've got quite a dark sense of humor and I'm quite dry, so I have to use emojis constantly. Otherwise, people think I'm a prick. So I've got a lot of smiley faces, a lot of laugh cry emojis, even though I've never cried and laughed at the same time.
Yeah, I think it set stone. Emoji set stone. So if you are a professional writer, best to tone it down with an emoji. Like if you don't have a emoji after, like law people, like if your lawyer sends you a message, you'll be like, yeah, this guy's a box in Afrikaans. But if he sends a emoji with a box in, and then you'll be like, okay, this bra's bringing me a present or something. So
it takes a lot of self-awareness for a lawyer to do that. I actually wouldn't want an emoji from my lawyer. I don't know if I'd take them seriously. It's like if your accountant or your auditor sends you an emoji, it can be a bit off-putting.
Yeah. If your accountant sends you an emoji, you're in trouble. There's definitely something wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, especially when it's a dollar sign. Like, SARS is after you. He's after you.
If your accountant sends you this one.
Hey, brah. This one.
Not good.
The new one with a one eye. You can only see the eye. With a melty one. Yeah, no. It's not, yeah. The thing about emojis is, sorry to break your word there, Gareth. The thing about emojis is, if your kids have phones, best you don't use emojis to send messages to them, because they might use the eggplant and the peach in the wrong way. Similarly, old people, like 75 onwards, and then they wanna make high five, and then they put the hands like this, praying hands, and then they're like, no, that's a high five. No, man, it's a high five. Like, so that's why they have a high five now, because they thought the praying hands was high five.
Listen, I know somebody who's as white as I am, but they use the black skin tone in all of it. And the fist and everything, when the black power fist, but all their emojis are in like caramel chocolate color. And I think some people would probably be upset about that. I don't know what kind of people would find a reason to be upset about that, but trust me, they exist on Earth. There's always someone.
It's appropriation, Gareth. It's cultural appropriation.
Exactly. So I wonder whether that's a big deal anymore. But the other funny thing about it is, like, here's Sanele who says, Sanele doesn't fuck around. He says, the funny thing is everyone uses the eggplant, but some people should be using a baby carrot.
Or a needle.
And Ethan says, Sanele, I'd rather just send a dick pic than fuck around with vegetables that look like cocks. You get fired for that.
Yeah. Ethan. Yeah, he's from Cape Town, Ethan.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got an upcoming show, Joey and his faves, right? So you and Dylan Oliphant and Mo Motebe. And this is at the Theater of Marcellus at Emperor's Palace. Tell us a little bit.
Yes, so it's all my favorite comedians, and Mo and Dylan was specifically available. Like Loiso might be there. He said he's traveling over the world. Chris Forrest also might be there. They said Kagiso Latiga also might be there. So I didn't want to put them on the poster because I wasn't sure that they'd be in the country at the time. Because those guys, they somehow go to New York now to do those shows. Apollo. Is Loisa Carlo live at Apollo? So so that's That's we on a Oostrand. Ons is daar naby East Red. So we're going to be at the Theatre of Marcellus on the 30th of July. It's called Chokers July. So the whole entire month. This weekend, tonight and tomorrow night is Alan Comedy. So you guys can go check out Alan. Yeah.
We saw Alan. We had him on Wednesday. And he was great. We also had a little cameo appearance by Gilly Upter, who's been traveling all over the world doing so much.
Yes. Gilly is one of the best writers I know of anything. Comedy, she's amazing. She's also a good director. One of the first movies I ever did was a student film for Gilly Upter 20 years ago. Yeah. How's that for a tomato?
It's pretty amazing. Great.
Yeah.
What was the student film about? Because those are usually terrible.
I can't remember. All I knew was I was a cook. I think I was a cook that was in Nelson Mandela Square. That's all I can remember. I can remember this though. I'm doing this other thing called like masterclasses, and it's an educational platform called Playbox. My Playbox, and My Playbox is like masterclasses from maybe they're gonna ask you, Gareth. We don't know, but it's a masterclass from South Africans by South Africans. And I have 11 episodes of my own masterclass. Then Lucas Radebe has one, Yvonne Chaka has one, Maps Mpanyane has one, Jody, I forget the son. Santi Puerta has one. Jody, the lady that does the photography. She's so brilliant. She's got one. So yeah, and then I speak about comedy and how you can use your funny bones in certain situations. Lucas Radebe speak about teamwork. I speak about how comedy can.
Are they sit you down in a studio and they film you, and then they put this out as a masterclass that people can download, they pay a subscription for, and then they can learn these skills?
Yes, but it wasn't that simple. It took like a year for me to write my masterclass. So it was like basically coming up with the curriculum and having exercises. So after each masterclass, there's a PDF that you can download with exercises like your homework and to go use it in the real world.
So how do you get people to be funny who are not funny? Like some boring accountant who works at an insurance company. How do you get that person to be a little bit more funny?
Look at Ben, bruh. Like Ben.
Carry on.
like Ben, if you meet him, then you'll be like, yeah, this is the most sturdiest guy I know. But he's funny. He channels. He's got funny bones, so he understands where his funny bones lie. And he even admitted it earlier, saying that he's got a dry sense of humor, and if he doesn't do certain things, people will think he's an arsehole. That is channeling your funny bones.
How do you feel about that, Ben?
Yeah, I thought that was going to go way worse.
No. Like Ben he's funny, but in his own way. Because if you don't know him and you just meet him for the first time, you think, hey, yeah, this guy is very intimidating and people. But he's funny. He's like on a golf course in each setting I've been at. Although he's dry.
Because you can't learn. What I like about this is that these are skills that you can't learn at school. These are skills that you can't learn at university either. Like I would rather have Joey Rasdien teach me this stuff than a lecturer at university. Because first of all, they can't. Second of all, they don't have the credibility to do it. And you've made a living out of this. This has been your career, so you take it seriously. The fact that you've had to spend a year writing a curriculum, figuring out exercises. I mean, this is very intense stuff. How much do you have to pay for the subscription to these masterclasses? Do you know?
Yeah, so the subscription is 299 Rand per month, but that's not for me. That's for everybody. That's for like Yvonne Chaka in music.
So you could learn, for example, the teamwork thing from Lucas Radebe. You could do that, and I can learn your stuff, and it's all under one subscription.
Yes, or you can do it. You can only buy an episode from me, and that would be like it's on special now. My Playbox is on special. You can buy all 11 episodes for only 99 Rand.
Where do we get this? How do we subscribe? Because I mean, this is to me, this makes perfect sense. It's way better than spending tens of thousands of rands on a university education, and then you can't get a job one day. Stupid.
It's myplaybox.co.za. The thing about it is, the cool thing about it is also clients or corporates can, instead of buying a corporate gift, can give their employees a QR code, and they can use that QR code forever for the rest of their lives, and constantly go back to, oh, what did Santi Buerta say about business? What did Santi Buerta say about marketing? What did Joey Rasdien say about empathy? So I speak about empathy as well.
You know, the best thing about this is that these are skills, obviously, that we don't get anywhere else, but they're also skills that are hugely necessary. Like if you think about how many people come out of school and university, we're doing a podcast proposal at the moment for one of our clients where we're going to teach people the basics of, like, everybody knows, you know, you're born maybe with a skill to be a hustler and you can get out there and you can sell or whatever, but no one teaches you at school about tax. They don't teach you about insurance. They don't teach you about interest rates. They don't teach you about inflation. All of those things, we hear them in the news every day and we think, oh, shit, because we just don't know. I mean, even the smart people aren't entirely sure what it means most of the time. So I saw the Reserve Bank has pushed up the interest rates. Now that affects all of us, whether we like it or not. Do they teach you that at school? Hell no. They don't even teach you that in accounting at school. If you do accounting all the way to matric, they don't teach you about that stuff. These are basic concepts, and nobody's teaching us these things. And then we end up trying to start a business at age 25 or something. You make some money in your first month, and then SARS comes along and says, thank you, we'll take half of that. And you're like, what? Because no one's explained it to you.
Yeah, that's unless you're Gaten and you are CEO in prison, then you can. Then you know, no, it's true though. If you like the leader of the 28th in prison, when you come out, that logistics, you must remember to get certain things in and out. It takes brains. I'm telling you now. So the bucket toilet system is nothing for him when he smuggled a whole entire camera into the prison and shot the prison guards.
Gayton McKenzie, by the way, is doing an incredible job in the Central Karoo district at the moment. They've put in toilets, they've put in plumbing, they've put in solar. They're doing a whole lot of really interesting things. You know, you can give a lot of politicians cuck and they would deserve it. But in the case of Gayton McKenzie, he's taking cuck and sorting the problem out, which I think is really impressive. You know, Helen Ziller always used to go on about toilets, and I used to tease her about it because every time she was in the news, it was like, toilets, 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 toilets. It's all anyone ever talks to me about is toilets. And she was right, because if people can't cuck, you know, if they don't have plumbing, like in so many parts of Cape Flats, for example, because you can't put pipes in. It used to be below sea level, so you can't dig too deep there because there's just water.
Yeah. The thing about that you just brought up now is that emoji will be put to good use when you're trying to the poo emoji would be put to good use, and the pipe one. So you see, we're trying to put pipes in for the cock to go to the sea, wherever it goes. I don't know.
It's probably some sewage treatment. We can only hope it doesn't get pumped straight into the sea. Anyway, Ben.
Yeah, in the first hour, we're speaking about education and intelligence. And I think comedians are absolute treasures in society. And I've always said this because, firstly, you need to be confident. Very few people are confident. And that's just something that people think like, I'm not confident, so I'm not going to try something. Like Joey, at what stage did you realize that you were confident? Was that like from...
I don't know, you broke up a bit there, but... I heard you speaking about confidence, and that's one of the lessons in my playbox about how to overcome your vulnerability. Exactly. So you have to be vulnerable. So all of us, each and every person is vulnerable. So in one of the playbox, we tackle how to overcome that vulnerability. So if you just think about Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, they're probably the most vulnerable people in the world. Specifically when they're on the soccer field, because they need to constantly perform, but they use that to their advantage, and there's certain exercises that you can do that. So when did I realize I was confident enough? It was when I became comfortable in my vulnerability. So if you're comfortable in your vulnerability, you automatically become confident.
Do you think so?
See, like
because
right there,
I'm yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
I agree. A little 10-second soundbite. Sorry, I think my internet's a bit slow today, but no, that's an incredible 10 seconds of education that you'll never learn in 12 years of school.
I think that this vulnerability thing is just, it's been pumped up too much. I think part of the reason that we are stuck as a civilization is because everyone's being so fucking vulnerable that no one is strong enough to do anything. So I hear you, and I agree with you, Joey, about the link between vulnerability and confidence. And I think, once you've faced your demons and you're prepared to face people, to stand up in front of a crowd, for example, and do what you do, which is a very rare skill. I mean, that obviously has to do with like being able to be vulnerable, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be able to get on the stage. So I get that, but I'm kind of sick of hearing everybody moan about how this is their problem, this is where they come from, this is their hard luck story. I mean, it's enough of that.
No, but
Gareth, but you have to take that
obviously there's levels.
One at a time.
No, but obviously there's levels. I must say you must glorify your vulnerability. It's like, okay, this is making me feel shit, and I'm going to be conscious of this, and now I'm going to go and make something out of this. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And that's exactly the lesson. That's the lesson.
Yeah, this is funny. Yonder says, if you can't cuck properly, you can't think properly. I think that's right. I mean, it's a basic fundamental thing, right? Listen, what kind of emojis do you think we really need in South Africa? We need one for Eskom, and we need more rude emojis. I feel like they've really sanitized a lot of them, and there are a lot of them that are very politically correct, but we need some that are a bit ruder. I mean, sometimes, especially if you're talking with your mates, the conversation isn't sanitary. It isn't clean. And we need some dirty emojis, and we need some angry emojis, because they've taken all of those away. They think that they can make us nicer people by taking all the horrible emojis away. Remember, they took away the gun because they thought it was promoting gun violence. They gave us like a water pistol.
Yeah. Well, Gareth, now that we've got the pregnant man, we can have anything, because that is just absolute bullshit. So therefore, there's full license for whatever you want.
Joey, for some reason, we're getting quite a lot of feedback on your headphones. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, now you've cut yourself out. Now we've lost you completely. There was definitely a bit of bleeding through of sound.
And now
we can hear you. That's better.
Okay, excellent. I don't know. Is this sound cancellation headphones?
It was doing the opposite. It was giving us like double sound. I can still hear a little bit.
Okay.
There's certain emojis we need in South Africa that we haven't got at the moment. I'm trying to think of what we need. Eskom, we definitely need one for load shedding. I mean, we can't just use that black square because they've already taken that for Black Lives Matter. So we need to have something that's a little more Eskom related.
I've got one. I've got a good one, and it'll be well used. It's the shocked and surprised emoji, and it's just Cyril's face.
Yeah, good one, because he's always shocked and surprised. That's exactly
completely
right.
Shocked and surprised, utterly shocked and surprised. Just
he doesn't eliminate the element of surprise. That guy, like if somebody hides money in a couch, and the next day people come take the money, and then you can't be surprised, like, yo, what happened? No, you hid it in a couch. Like if you hid it somewhere in a ceiling, maybe, then you'll be like, yo, how did they find that? But not in a couch. Like,
no, I mean,
like
really.
people were like, what?
I asked this question after we heard that he kept all his money in the sofa. How many other politicians have got furniture that's stacked with cash? Like, you could buy an old side table from Nomvula Mokonyane, and you could find like tons of cash in there. You don't know. We should go to all of their houses. We should just go to all of their houses with scalpels and just open them up and see what's going on in their furniture. Because I reckon this is a thing all these politicians are doing. If Cyril's doing it, trust me, the others are doing it too. Because he would have got the idea from one of them, and they would have been sharing his ideas. I'm telling you, they're all like hiding money in their furniture.
Yeah, Krugerrands. Some of them Krugerrands. They're not dollars.
Like, this is a very heavy mattress.
Yeah.
Why does this
Go.
more than the car?
I think you must go to Franschhoek and Veldevere Estate and Stellenbosch, and then you'll find some room dividers with Krugerrands in there. I'm
reckon?
sure. I'm positive. I think that's where it started.
Where do you think these people? How do they hide this stuff when they sell the house? Because if you move houses, then you obviously have to knock down the walls, and then people who've bought the house expect there to be a wall. Do you just knock it down and build a new one because you've got all the Krugerrands to pay for it?
I know. Interesting story about knocking down walls and stuff. The Betty Kotani story was actually, that case was a cold case. And that case was solved because the person sold a house and then they broke down and then they found all Carrington's letters and they found all the evidence. Yeah. So you must watch.
Amazing. It's an amazing story. That's a real cold case story, South African style. And it's not, I mean, I don't know why they bother with these boring American stories when we've got these things happening right here. And
yeah,
I wonder, like, often you hear these stories about people who move into a house that's old, that was built in like the 1920s or whatever, and then they're busy fixing the ceiling or whatever, and they find a whole new room hidden in the house, with like a whole bunch of weird stuff in there.
The attic. I think most bunkers, the old houses also had bunkers, especially like in Houghton and stuff, just in case the riots happen, and then they could protect themselves. But that's property value in South Africa is useless, guys. That's my financial advice for you today.
Well, that's why we subscribe to your Playbox, because we want financial advice.
Santi Buerta is there.
So, all right, you're doing the show at Emperor's Palace. What else are you up to? What, for example, this weekend, what are you going to be doing?
So this weekend I'm doing absolutely nothing. I'm gonna go watch my daughter play hockey this afternoon and tomorrow. So she's playing hockey. I actually on EVOD, the new streaming service for ETV, video on demand, our movie The Umbrella Men is out on there. So if you have a spare moment this weekend, it's like 20 rand. So you can just go buy it for 20 rand and stream it. It's a movie. It's a movie about the Klopse band, the carnivals, that robs the bank during the carnival. So
is this a true story or is it a fantasy?
No, it's a fantasy. It's just like we wanted to do a heist movie, but the Cash in Transit heist vibes was it's too violent heat and all those things. So we did a one similar to like
are you in it?
Inside Man. Yes. I don't play a funny character. I play a bit of a mean character. Jacques de Silva is in there, and Keenan Harrison is in there. So that is being released now. It's on EVOD, and a new material this week, not this weekend, next weekend is the Comedian's Cut. So the Comedian's Cut next weekend, on Friday it will be in Cape Town, on Saturday in Tubin, and on Sunday in Johannesburg at Killarney.
You've been busy, man. You have not stopped for a second. You made movies. You're busy recording stuff. You're going to roasts. You're doing your own show. This is awesome. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, but it needs to be financially viable,
Yeah,
so
sure.
what COVID did to us, that.
Of course. No, of course.
Yeah. So that's the only bad thing.
I don't know about you guys, but if I'm not busy, then I get very frustrated. So I've been packing in the meetings, trying to see as many people as possible. I'm back on full steam ahead, all pistons firing kind of stuff, because I hate it when I'm sitting around. Yesterday, for example, I had a whole bunch of meetings lined up from 10 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My 10 o'clock canceled, which was irritating. So then I had an 11:30. That never happened because the one guy didn't pitch for the meeting. And if you get through like 2 meetings where nothing happens or one of them is canceled, it's very frustrating. You actually start getting a bit miserable through the course of your day. You want stuff to happen. And especially when you're the one pushing for these things to happen and they don't, it can get very annoying.
The thing about COVID, when it was lockdown level 5 the first time. I loved it. It was so nice because you can tell people, no, it's level 5, but no, we can't. I can't see you. Now it's like the opposite. Now it's like, yes, the day I want to see people. So for 2 years, you didn't want to see people, and now it's like the opposite. It's I don't know. It's a wiring thing in your brain. I think it's like
people are still on a go slow, and it's driving me crazy. Like there's still people using the excuse that someone said to me the other day they've got COVID, and I was like, really? It's 2022. Yeah, it's Omicron. It's not serious. Like, are you telling me you can't come to a meeting because you have COVID? It's ridiculous. And also these people are like, oh, no. Now they're using the petrol price as an excuse. Everyone's saying, oh no, I can only go into the office twice a week because petrol's so expensive.
But it is, though.
No, it is. It's a fair consideration. But like, what did you do before? What? Imagine a world before COVID where you said to your boss, no, because the petrol price is too high. I can only come in 3 days this week. Your boss would have fired you in those days. It was only because of COVID that you can get away with that now.
Yeah, it's also because of COVID that I'm not in the studio and Ben is at his house and you are where you are.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that sucks because I'm buffering here so hard. Every time I want to talk, it's like the next moment.
No, it seems like you're back. I don't know what happened. Your building's power must have come back on at the right time or something.
I've obviously got, it's the same thing. But my neighbors are doing so much porn so early on a Friday. They're just whacking my Wi-Fi off.
I wonder what the prime time porn is on the internet. I wonder if anyone's done any research. Because it is the biggest thing on the internet, right? Like porn and gambling, and maybe what else would be huge on the internet? Really, porn and gambling. That's it. They've been from day one the most important things on the internet, right? So I wonder if people have done research into when during the day is the main time people are watching porn. I think that would be fascinating. What if we find out it's like lunchtime while at the office?
Ugh.
Yeah, gross, right? Wouldn't that tell you a lot about human nature?
It's everyone's each their own. Whatever gets you through the day, just don't do it during a meeting.
Well, didn't that guy from CNN, what was it, Jeffrey Tubin? Remember, he was on a Teams meeting with a whole lot of people from CNN. They were in an
yes,
and he was busy. He was having a go. He was masturbating furiously during this meeting with all the other guys from CNN. And then people could see, but he didn't know his camera was on. An idiot.
Poor lie. That's just how he gets off. He has to have an audience.
But he's back on CNN and everybody's pretending it never happened. They're all going on like, no, it's fine. It's YouTube and it's not an issue. I mean, I would have been traumatized to have to see that guy doing it. Please.
That's so controversial, but yeah. Like, here's my thing. So the same with the LGBTQ plus community, like so people, we need to accept them, and I do, and it's lekker. Sure. But so now, what if this other bra likes to watch porn on his phone, and then he's like, you have to accept me. I'm coming here in my taxi and I'm gonna watch now, and you just have to accept me.
Listen,
so
Joey, someone told me that they were once on an airplane, and they saw a guy in the row in front of them watching this stuff on the plane.
Yes, I also saw that once, but it was more TikTok videos. But yeah, it was similar. Potato.
All right, let's change the subject this morning because George Mienie is here from Auto Trader. George, of course, the CEO of Auto Trader. It's good to see you, George. And George, when you're on the show means it's the last little bit of our Friday morning, and it's time to find out about what's going on with cars, with our roads, with the petrol price, with all of the stuff that affects you and me, and everything to do with cars. The CEO of Auto Trader, George Mienie, what do you have to tell us today?
Hey Gareth, how's it been? And that was a really funny segment. I am flipping killing myself laughing here.
Joey's the best.
Joey, I'm considering going to do Joey's courses.
Yeah, I think we should all. What's happening, George?
So the driver's license renewal backlog, I don't know if you read, Gareth, has been cleared. So the Road Traffic Management Corporation has cleared the backlog, and it should now take you about 6 weeks to get your driver's license.
George, one last, Joey. I went on Friday last week and I collected my driver's license card. It arrived and I'm so impressed. So it's going to be another 5 years until I have to do that again. Don't know why they don't just make it 10 years, George. Is there a reason?
I think it has something to do with tax, because you've got to pay every 5 years. But the civil society group AfriForum is trying to push back and change the 5 years to 10 years. I agree. I think it should be 10 years.
Stupid. But anyway, I've got mine, so I'm thrilled. Remember I told you I had a great experience there? Well, fetching it was also easy, and it just depends which one you go to. Some of these driver's license places are very good. Some of them are absolutely cuck. So if you end up at a cuck one, I'm very sorry, but I got mine and I'm thrilled. So I'm glad that they've cleared the backlog. Good news.
That's very good news. Let's hopefully they keep the backlog cleared. And then you're into chemistry, Gareth, and you probably know something about solid state batteries. Which replaces the electrolyte inside. Every battery's got a liquid chemical that transfers the electrons between the anode and the cathode. And solid-state batteries apparently now have been researched to reduce its carbon footprint by almost 30%. So a lot of OEMs are doing studies into when solid-state batteries could become the de facto battery inside an electric vehicle because of this carbon footprint.
Well, George, they've just done some interesting research in the US, and this is going to piss off the environmentalists, but apparently air conditioning in America accounts for 17% of, and they're going through a heat wave in parts of Europe and America right now, so air conditioning is on everybody's mind. So air conditioning uses about 17% of the total amount of power in each average household in America. 17%.
Wow.
Do you know how much it would cost if every household in America also plugged in their car to charge it, if they were using an EV?
Based on my own EV, my house consumption doubled. So I use 20 kilowatt hours per day, between 20 and 25 kilowatt hours per day. That's gone to 50 kilowatt hours per day based on my car.
Right. So what you've just proven is exactly the point. So I just want to remind the environmentalists, if we all drive electric vehicles, which is what Pete Buttigieg, who's the national secretary in the US of transport, he says, oh, don't worry about this fuel price thing, people, just buy an EV. So, I mean, that's just nonsense because you'll double the amount of energy you use in your house. And while we're all fans of EVs, I don't see a problem with them. If you double the amount of power that you need in your house, which in this country means if we have to increase by another 100% the amount of power, that's not going to end up being a very good solution for us, is it?
Well, there's another problem, Gareth, and this wasn't on what I was going to talk about this morning, but there is another problem, and this is getting too technical, but every single house in South Africa that has a single phase line to that house has a maximum of 63 amp breaker in the distribution board. Now, simple maths says that 63 amps multiplied by the voltage delivery, which is 230 volts, gives you a maximum number of watts that you can pull out of that house, which if you take 63 amps multiplied by 230 volts gives you about anywhere between 13.5 to 15 kilowatts at any one time. That's the peak. So
those houses wouldn't be able to charge their cars and have power for the house.
Well, depends on how much power you use. So if you're running your stove, your geyser, your lights and plugs, and you plug your EV in, chances are you're going to go over the 63 amps. So we have another problem inside houses when it comes to EVs.
So in other words, let's not all jump on this bandwagon just yet. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to come into play. And Eskom have obviously also got to get their act together because otherwise we're not going to be able to charge our cars. So these are just the realities. I mean, I know we talk about EVs, we talk about the future. It is going to get better, but I think we've got to be realistic as well.
Yep, and I'm a big proponent for EVs, but there are realities, like you say.
Yes, correct. All right, what else do you got for us?
Much more fun topic. Why do birds poop on cars? Ben, you love that one.
No, it's Hardy Does. Hardy Does were made. They're the only ones that escaped the prehistoric meteor attack, just so they can crap on our cars. They're the only dinosaurs that remain, just for that purpose.
I parked my car at this one spot just a couple of days ago. Now, the car was clean, and I parked it under this tree for probably, George, I don't want to say more than 2.5, 3 hours. I think pterodactyls must have flown over there. I guess it's Joey. You have no idea how much shit was on my car. When I drove away, it looked like there must have been 200 birds who all, out of pure spite, decided to unload on my car. Is there a real reason, George?
Absolutely, there is a reason. So what color was the car, Gareth?
Silver.
Okay, so UK a company did a piece of research on why do birds poop on cars? And it turns out that the color of the car is the most important thing. So red cars are pooped on most.
Okay.
And the reason red cars are pooped on most is because they look like ripened fruits and berries. So the birds come and sit on your car.
All right.
Blue is second on the list because it looks like a watery surface.
Mm-hmm.
So birds poop on blue cars second, and then silver is third. And the reason silver is third is because birds are a little bit afraid of silver objects. So silver is probably a good color of car to drive, but they still poop on them. Black is fourth, and because of the glossy reflective surface, the bird can see itself in the reflective surface. And then the color that birds poop on the least is green.
Yes, I've got a green car, George. I knew it was a good call.
Well done, Ben. So you're going to get chat on less than everybody else's cars.
Awesome.
Okay.
So how do you prevent birds from pooping on your car? And maybe this would have been a trick, and you can take this with you next time, Gareth, is put a rubber snake on the roof of your car.
Yeah. That will keep lots of things away.
All right, I'll do it. Let's see if it makes a difference. Why is that supposed to scare the birds so they stay away from your car?
Well, because they think it's a predator, and they avoid the area. So, so put a snake on the roof of your car. And the other thing is, if you can, reflective surfaces scare birds away. Put old CDs to use. I'm not saying hang it in your rearview mirror like some people do, but.
I like an old CD hanging from the rearview mirror. What the hell's wrong with that? But you mean you should just put a bunch of old CDs in the back window, on the back thing there. That might also do the job.
Exactly.
All right,
and then very lastly, how long can a car stay parked without driving it?
I always worry about this. Like if I go away for a couple of days and I leave my car, I always think, because your parents and your grandparents always tell you, you've got to keep the engine running. Someone's got to start the engine, otherwise the battery's going to die. What is the truth here?
So the truth is probably 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
Okay. Because two things happen within 2 to 3 months. One, the battery does die. And then secondly, the petrol inside the petrol tank reacts with oxygen and then can become useless.
Oh, really? Huh. Okay, so it's 2 months. That's not so bad.
It's not so bad. If you go away for a couple of days, you don't have to do anything drastic.
Well, listen, that's all we got time for this morning. Joey, always lucky to see you. George, always great to see you too. Ben, we will catch up next week. Have an excellent weekend, everybody. Be good and enjoy your Friday.
All righty,
Cheers
all the best. All right.
Bye-bye.